From my days as an advisor in the Harper government to today, I've had the privilege of working alongside the member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman on several files, excuse me, observing firsthand his steadfast commitment to human rights, accountability, and the rule of law. Throughout his career, he has consistently demonstrated a deep understanding of international affairs, a tireless work ethic, and a principled approach to defending Canadian values. I've seen it up front as we walked the cobblestone streets of Kiev amidst jubilant protesters, then later amid burned buildings and the same stones ripped from the ground in self-defense. He does not act for political convenience. He acts with clarity, with conviction, and a sense of responsibility to Canadians and those whose freedoms are imperiled. To stand with him on this legislation is a recognition not only of the urgency of the issue before us, but also to honor the dedication and leadership he brings before this House. He has championed measures to protect Canadians and confront the very real threat posed by authoritarian regimes that seek to project their influence into our own communities. This bill would enable the Canadian government, in addition to human rights abusers, to confront dictator corruption and transnational repression. Across our country, people who have fled persecution and violence rightfully expect to be safe. They expect their homes to be sanctuaries, free from the nightmare of the dictator they now deny. Yet reports show that authoritarian regimes are following their citizens into Canada to intimidate, to coerce, and to silence them. This is real. It is ongoing. Current laws have not kept up with the tactics of these regimes. C-219 provides clarity, accountability, and enforcement mechanisms. It will prevent Canada from being used as a safe haven by individuals responsible for corruption and human rights abuses. Let me cover three parts in this in my remarks: the context, why this legislation is critical, and our duty as parliamentarians. Sergei Magnitsky was tortured to death for exposing Kremlin corruption, and from his gave the free world its most potent weapon against the new authoritarians: targeted sanctions that strike the torturers, the kleptocrats, and their enablers where it hurts most: their bank accounts and their visas. Today, the long arm of Beijing, Tehran, Moscow, and their proxies reach into Canada itself. Death threats, bounties, covert police stations, intimidation of dissidents, all on our soil. This is not mere crime. This is transnational repression, the export of tyranny into the heart of the free world. Thanks to the persistence of over a decade by the member from Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman, we already have established human rights violations as Magnitsky powers almost a decade ago. We must now sharpen them into a dedicated tool to confront transnational repression, swift, automatic, merciless consequences for any regime that dares hunt its critics on Canadian streets. In the Cold War, we drew a line and said, not 1 inch further. Today, we must say the same. Canada will never be a hunting ground for dictators. We will find you, we will freeze your assets, and we will make you pay. Magnitsky's story is not simply a tale of courage. It is a reminder that one person armed with the truth can expose an entire system of lies. His murder was meant to frighten others into silence, but instead it triggered an international movement that forced democracies to confront a hard question about themselves. Do we still believe in moral consequence, or are we willing to let power excuse anything? That is what makes today's debate more than a matter of policy. It is a statement about who Canadians choose to be in an age when authoritarian regimes think the world has grown too tired, too distracted, or too divided to stand up to them. Our answer must be calm, clear, and confident. Canada will not retreat from its role as a defender of those who risk everything to speak truth in countries where truth is treated as a crime. We cannot talk about this without talking about the world we now live in, a world in which authoritarians are emboldened by new technologies. What once required secret agents crossing borders now only requires a phone, a television, a consulate, or a proxy group operating quietly in our communities. Transnational repression is not abstract theory. It is happening in cities across the country, and it targets the people who trusted Canada to give them what their homelands denied them: safety, a voice, freedom. If authoritarian states can reach into our cities to intimidate their critics, then we no longer control the space we claim as our own. That is why the response cannot be symbolic or slow. It must be predictable enough that dictators understand the cost before they act, and swift enough that victims understand they are not alone. Renaming the Special Economic Measures Act to the Magnitsky Act is part of that clarity. There is power in naming something after a man who died telling the truth. It signals that the purpose of the law is not hidden behind technical language or bureaucratic jargon. It is a law built around a moral line that should never have been blurred. The name teaches every Canadian what the law stands for and tells every authoritarian what it means to be when Canada acts. The Cold War had a clarity that many in our era have forgotten. It drew a line between the world of fear and the world of freedom. Today, the battle lines are not marked on maps, but they are just as real. They run through the phones of dissidents who receive threats at midnight. They run through the inboxes of activists who are told their families back home will suffer. They run through the hearts of communities who came to Canada believing they had escaped a regime, only to find that the regime had followed them here. If we do not draw a line now, we teach these regimes that Canada can be bent, that our values can be shaped by intimidation, that our borders are something that they can violate. This is why we strengthen Magnitsky powers. This is why we direct them at transnational repression. This is why we sharpen the law into something that cannot be evaded with excuses or hidden behind diplomatic language. Magnitsky's legacy is not only about his death, it is about the world that responded to it. Democracies came together because they recognized that a system that allows corruption, torture, and murder to flourish unchallenged is a system that eventually threatens us all. The legislation before this House carries that same spirit. It connects the struggle of one man in Moscow, in a Moscow prison, to the safety of a Canadian family in Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, or Montreal. When we act, we're not only honoring Magnitsky's courage, we are reminding the world that Canada is not passive in the face of cruelty. We are reminding those who fled oppression that this country takes their safety seriously. And we are reminding those who inflict oppression that they will face consequences even if they believe their borders protect them. This is the heart of this legislation, a line drawn clearly, without drama and without hesitation. A country stating that its sovereignty is not for negotiation and its people are not for intimidation. Madam Speaker, transnational repression is a direct threat to the safety and dignity of people living here in Canada. It is carried out by regimes in Beijing, the Kremlin, Tehran, and beyond. Our intelligence community documents that these governments have conducted operations across Canada, including intimidation, surveillance, harassment of activists, students, journalists, and persecution of diaspora communities. Whether you are Sikh or Hindu, or Christian, Muslim, or Jew, whether you come from Hong Kong or the Donbass, Tibet or East Turkestan, or among the Iranians that stand against their regime, all who come here to live in freedom now must contend with the designs of the dictators they fled. We also see immediate family members of the very people we have sanctioned living in luxury in Canada while their relatives engage in corruption, theft, or violent repression abroad. The tragedy of Flight PS752 is a stark example. Families of the victims have waited years for compensation despite frozen regime assets that could have been used to provide justice. Russian assets could and should be directed to support Ukraine and its defense. Frozen funds should contribute to justice and accountability for people whose war for existence is waged this very day. When foreign governments intimidate or threaten individuals on Canadian soil, it is not only a violation of the rights of those affected, it is a test of the strength of our laws and our institutions. Bill C-219 ensures that Canada responds firmly, transparently, and consistently. So to those who have sought refuge in Canada, to those who live in fear of foreign regimes, and to Canadians who expect their government to defend their sovereignty, this bill delivers clarity, protection, and accountability. It is now the responsibility of this House to act. Support for Bill C-219 is support for the rule of law, support for victims of oppression, and support for Canada as a safe and principled country. Madam Speaker, may this bill not be a partisan one, but pass as a parliamentary one instead. Thank you very much.